Look, I like to see Windows lose popularity and Linux to grow as much as the next person. At the same time, I also understand that we don't actually have good metrics and good market share numbers here, so a lot of what we have are open to abuse, open to miscalculation, and a lot of people really take these numbers just as gospel. This is what the number is, this is how many people are using it. And with the recent month of StatCounter data, which is the site that everyone points to, like, this is how many people are using this browser, this is how many people are using Android or iOS, or in this case, this is how many people are using Windows, Mac, and Linux. A lot of outlets, specifically Linux ones, jumped right on this. Windows drops under 60% in global desktop OS share for the first time in years. StatCounter's June 2026 report shows Linux at one of its strongest recent positions, while Windows falls to 56.55%. When this happened, I did not cover this at the time. I don't usually make videos on the weekend unless like something big comes up. I usually queue things up and, roll through it like that. But others did immediately jump on it. And, well, if you go to the chart now, it tells a bit of a different story. Yes, it still says 56.61%. However, the graph actually shows 72%. So, of course, with a bunch of Linux people jumping in to say, Windows is dying, look guys, Windows is falling, number bad, number down. Of course, when it turns out that the number actually wasn't down, you have the Windows people who decide to clap back as well. No, Windows did not fall below 60% market share or lose 20 points to Linux. This one, I don't even know where anyone even got the idea from this, because the number didn't actually go up by 20% for Linux, like, at all. That was actually never represented in the data that we had for Linux. In this graph, it is 4.39% for Linux. So that premise didn't even make sense to begin with. So what actually took place here? Well, take note of the graph. Linux did go up a bit, macOS did go up a bit, but most of the people are in something, and you can see it here, known as unknown. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, the unknown, that's Linux users who are pretending like they're not on Linux. They've modified their user agent string, because as we know, every single Linux user cares about privacy. Every single Linux user knows what a user agent string is. Every single Linux user is really, really techie. Anyone who thinks that, look, I'm glad you have high expectations of people, but I can assure you, there's a lot of morons on Linux. Windows' reputation may be at an all-time low, that's one way to put it, but that doesn't mean the operating system's market share has dropped below 60%. As expected, StatCounter has admitted that it messed up and rolled out fresh data that shows Windows at 72%. It'll likely climb back to 78% in the coming weeks as the numbers continue to adjust. Normally, there is a decimal point there. The fact that there isn't a decimal point does indicate to me that maybe this isn't entirely accurate as is, and they're still trying to properly clean up the data. It's clear that even if you take StatCounter's retracted numbers at face value, Linux's market share growth did not explain the reported 28% drop in Windows usage. Where did the missing chunk of Windows users go? I downloaded the data from StatCounter, and we found that an operating system labeled unknown suddenly accounted for 21.45% of the desktop market share. This category could include any device where the browser's user agent is modified, unavailable, or cannot be correctly identified by StatCounter. This is going to have your malformed user agents, your user agents that are pretending to be various other things which may or may not exist, your VPN users, oftentimes that is being modified with that as well, but also, and very, very importantly, web scrapers. Notably, something we have a lot of right now, AI crawlers. And if we look at the number, if we look at this bar for unknown, this is just this 1 year, it has been growing. It has been growing quite quickly. I don't want to believe that 20% of web traffic is AI crawlers. Whilst I don't want to believe it, considering that I know a lot of web admins who openly say, we cannot keep up with all of this AI crawler traffic, I would not be surprised if 20% of the internet is AI crawlers at this point. But there is an alternate explanation, an explanation which has happened quite a number of times before. Sometimes StatCounter is just wrong. For example, back in 2025 when Windows 10 went EOL, suddenly Windows 7 shot up to about 10% market share. Now, I know a lot of people really wanted this to be true. Guys, Windows 11 is so bad, people are swapping back to Windows 7, which doesn't even make sense as a concept, because if you don't like Windows 11, why wouldn't you just keep using Windows 10? It's not like Windows 7 is any better supported than Windows 10 is. Also, a lot of people don't even know what an operating system is, let alone actually go and install it. So, of course, surprising absolutely no one ever, within a couple of days, that number was recorrected because, no, people didn't just suddenly swap back to Windows 7. No. Again, here it is showing the exact same thing happening with Google as a search engine. Do I think that suddenly they would lose 10% market share in a month? No. However, going back to the whole AI crawlers thing, do I think there is something which can take away market share from Google? Yes, that would be LLMs. I don't doubt that at least someone went and installed Windows 7 after Windows 10 went EOL. Do I think that 10% of Windows 10 users just suddenly did it? No, I don't think that. And do I think that out of nowhere, suddenly 20% of people just stop using Windows? No. Also, the graph has been corrected. Later, StatCounter rectified the numbers, and Windows 7 went back to less than 1% of the desktop market share. Windows 11 may be bad or good. No, it's just bad, but that is a different topic. At no point did it make sense for Windows 7 to jump to over 10% from less than 1%. If it was this gradual growth over time, hey, maybe I could believe that, but a sudden spike is very, very strange. If somebody hates Windows 11, they'd switch back to Windows 10 or try macOS or Linux, not go back to Windows 7. This is something I do think actually did happen, right? You don't like Windows 11, and maybe not like a massive percentage, but like 0.1%, 0.01%, then take that as an opportunity to give Linux at least a try. Whether or not they're going to stick with it, at least try it out. But a movement of 0.1% or 0.01%, that's a lot more realistic than a 10%, a 20%, a 25% market shift out of nowhere. I have discussed this in prior videos, but it is very important to consider what StatCounter is actually showing you, what it is actually counting, because it's not just inventing OS usage, not just inventing browser usage or anything else that it might track, but it's also not directly tracking the real number that is how many people are using this system. StatCounter uses anonymous metrics, detects the user agent of each visit, and comes up with a comprehensive market share estimate for browsers and operating systems. This is something that web admins install onto their sites. That means even if the base is large, StatCounter numbers are still estimates. They can give you a rough idea, but not an exact picture. That means even if the base is large, and for StatCounter it is very, very large, StatCounter numbers are still estimates. It's probably the best estimates we can get, but they are estimates. They can give you a rough idea, but not an exact picture. So when StatCounter says Windows 7 is under 1% market share, that broadly makes sense because how often do you find Windows 7 at commercial places or with consumers today? Only a relatively small number of older PCs still run it. There are plenty of air-gapped machines out there that are running Windows 7, but StatCounter is counting users on the web. Those machines are not at all relevant. There's still quite a lot of machines out there that are running XP and older, but there's no way to count those machines. Unfortunately, StatCounter has a difficult role to play here, and mistakes are bound to happen. For example, bots, AI crawlers, scrapers, modified user agents, and other traffic patterns can manipulate or distort the numbers, causing a brief spike or drop like we're seeing in the case of Windows' overall market share now, or Windows 7 last year, or Google search results, or any of the other numbers which have seen massive changes. We remove bot activity and make a small adjustment to our browser stats for pre-rendering in Google Chrome. Aside from those adjustments, we publish the data as we record it, as per StatCounter's documentation. StatCounter has already rectified the Windows error in June 2026, which likely would have happened even without noise from influencers. But I don't fully agree with the conclusion here. The inaccurate figures were most likely caused by ambiguous Windows traffic being misclassified as unknown. I do think a large part of it is going to be that, but I also do think a lot of it is going to be AI scrapers because, again, I don't want to believe it, but we've all seen RAM prices, we've all seen traffic hits on websites. It's a lot of AI scrapers. Whether it be these numbers here or any other estimates, and yes, that includes the Steam hardware survey, they should be treated as estimates, not as absolute values. I know people like to get very excited. Linux reaches new peak of 5.33% in Steam hardware and software survey, March 2026. Steam hardware survey for me is out. Linux down at 3.99%, but still above macOS. I know that people love to get excited about these numbers, especially when some big milestone is hit or some major drop happens. I get it. But instead of looking at the individual numbers, they should be treated as a collection of data points representing a trend over time. Because StatCounter does show a very interesting trend. The blue line at the top here, that is Windows. This is from 2009 to 2026. It has generally been trending downwards. Now, most of that is, of course, going to go to macOS, but Linux is going up a bit. Chrome OS actually went down. Android, I didn't even know why Android's been counted there, but macOS and Linux are both going up, right? Like, people are using these operating systems. There was a dip with OS X. I don't know what you could count this for. Maybe Apple Silicon. Who knows what the reason was? But this, I think, is the more interesting number. Over the years, more and more people are willing to try out something different. And when you look at it as this long-term graph, then it does start to account for those month-to-month weird oddities. And no, saying that Linux goes from under 1% to about 4 to 5% over 17 years, that's not exciting. That's not exciting whatsoever. I get that it is not exciting. And saying that Windows went down from 95 to 72% over 17 years, that's not as exciting as saying it went down by 23% in a single month. I get it. But it's also more close to what's actually happening. These numbers represent a trend, a direction things are going. They're not an absolute value of this is the exact market share we have, but it does show a direction. And sometimes things just don't have to be exciting month to month, day to day, because over a year, over multiple years, there's still something happening. Every single day, little steps are being made, sometimes forwards, sometimes backwards, but progress is overall being made, and over a long enough time span, you find yourself in a much, much better position. If you're watching this and you like Windows, good for you. I'm not trying to take Windows away from you, even if it would be kind of funny to do so. But at the end of the day, it is beneficial to both you and I that Microsoft actually has some competition, because for a long time, they have been really, really complacent. And when you have no competition, you can get away with doing things where you wouldn't get away with it in an actual market. You can force features onto users that they don't want because they don't have an option. So no, Windows did not drop 20% market share over a month, but it did drop at about 17 years. And for me, hey, that's better than nothing, and Linux is going up slowly with it. So, let me know your thoughts down below. If you liked the video, go like the video. Let me know what you think of these metric sites and how you use them and what you think of people just using them as these absolute values. I would love to know, so go subscribe as well. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to Liberapay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and slowly but surely.
Something like this.